better than your currency. Splurging millions, buying houses like Monopoly. Fucking 9 to 5, man, the money is a joke to me. Buying cryptocurrency, my money in the privacy. I make it rain dollars, they watch me disappear. I'm so fly, man, I'ma need some land again.
Hey guys and girls, welcome to this week's episode of the B.Invested Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Birch, and this is the show unraveling the truth to the start of the 21st century. We're now exit the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. Today I have a special guest. We've got Steve McCormack. Steve, thanks a lot for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome, mate. We go way back, don't we? This is
Yeah, it's been a long time. We haven't necessarily worked with each other for a huge amount of time, but yeah, we've certainly. I remember first meeting you a long time ago.
Yeah, I had no grey hair and much younger, and how long ago? It'd be like 2010, 2011, 2009.
Yeah, probably earlier. I'd say 2009. I'd say.
Because we met in the pub, didn't we?
Yeah, we
had
did.
an office.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was before you started B.Invested, so it was certainly a long time ago. But you were kicking a lot of goals, and I wanted to see what I could do to sort of copy you a little bit.
Yeah, and I think maybe you seen me on a newspaper clipping or something. Was that like, how did you come across me? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was on the bus heading to work. I was working out at St Leonard's at the time, and I was standing on the bus, and there was a lady sitting down next to me that was reading the newspaper, and I saw an article about you and what you'd been achieving, and so I quietly read the newspaper article over her shoulder and sort of had to ask her to turn back a page when she turned over before I'd finished. So I I sort of tracked you down from there and just started chatting.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's a long time ago. Like Facebook wasn't even really a thing. You can't just go to Instagram and find people back in the day. It's a bit of tracking me down. So thanks for that, Steve. And
yeah. Well, really, I mean, I got to thank you, because it's not often that you find someone that's willing to give up their time for someone that they don't know, willing to share their knowledge. So it was really a privilege.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Steve. And I guess maybe if you can give like the viewers or listeners just a little bit of a background just on your story and sort of what you do and what you're trying to do and all that as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I consider myself a fairly regular guy. I'm 41 now. I've got a fiancée and 2 daughters, 9 and 11, and essentially what I'm trying to do, I mean, I'm an IT professional by trade, so that's what I do for my bread and butter at the moment. But the main thing I'm trying to do is retire so that I can spend time with the family. It's time's a very limited resource, and so I want to make the best use of it that I can.
Yeah. Those kids, they grow up very fast, mate, and they grow up fast, and you just want to spend time with them and enjoy it. So
and you don't want to miss out on that time. Like they're from a previous marriage, and so I don't get to see them as much as I'd like to, and so that time becomes even more precious. Yeah,
true.
Yeah,
awesome. Cool. And I guess like things that you're working on at the moment, like what are you trying to work on? Like obviously we're trying to work on getting the portfolio build. Like, what's the next big goal for you on your journey?
Well, my partner, or my fiancée Paula, and I, we've only ever really had 2 goals. Number 1, own your own house, and number 2, don't need to work.
Yeah.
And so everything that we've been doing is pushing towards those 2 goals. And I mean, that's something that Paula and I talk about quite a lot, and we really get into the nuts and bolts of it to make sure we're on the same page. We have even prioritized those goals and said, look, if owning our own home, if we have to pick one or the other, we pick retirement. Owning the own home doesn't have to be. That's more of a nice to have. And so the goals are around, if we need to make a sacrifice, we know what we need to do, and we know what direction we're heading.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess if we look just at your position, because people watching this, and I thought, I've been doing the podcast now for a while, but it's important that the community get to see, what other people are doing. I can sit here and say, oh, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. And it's good because, people can relate and go, okay, yeah, Steve's like me, or this other person's, got a similar sort of position or whatever. So your background, like, what do you do for work?
IT. I'm a
IT.
computer nerd. So, yeah, I've always loved computers and the mathematics around it. And so that's kind of where I delved into. And I guess, I don't know, growing up as a kid, I had a vision that if I worked with computers, that meant I could sit around playing computer games all day, but it doesn't turn out that way, and I still love what I do, but I'd rather be able to do it because I choose to rather than because I have to.
Yeah. Awesome. And I guess, when you go into a career when you're younger, like this is funny. So I don't know if I've ever talked about it to anyone, but I was like a computer nerd when I was younger. Hey, like I was full into it. And I think it was in year 10, I got like some university I did this course in university. Like everyone thinks I'm like dumbass and stuff, but I actually got this course. I wanted to be in IT. That was going to be my profession. I wanted to be in IT. And I was like, I'm just going to get into property. I love property. So it's funny. But I guess like, when you first started your career to where you are now, where you started looking at property, where you're at now, how do you think you've grown, and how do you think your mindset has shifted with the property side of things over the last little while?
Well, it's a good question. I think I've always been directed towards property. My journey started very young. My family were very open about money. We used to sit around the dinner table at night time playing a game called Polyconomy, which is sort of a game similar to Monopoly, but it's from the 70s and 80s. So it's from a long time ago and a very old school game. But we used to sit around playing that. And my dad used to work in the bank. He used to be heading up the complaints department in CBA. And so I guess from that perspective, he heard a lot of people having difficulty financially, and his approach was, well, if I impart some of this knowledge to my kids, or at least give them an insight into what I do, then they might choose to pick up the banner and run with it. And I think that's probably where it came from. And I mean, I'm probably drawing a short story out to be a long story, but essentially I think I first started looking into it when I was in about year 7 or 8 at school. And it's when I started, I guess, really, rather than just listening to what my dad was saying, I actually started thinking for myself a bit more. And I started asking questions, and I was like, look, what happens about this? And I do remember what happens if, we were learning about how money is created. And I've only been thinking about this in the last, say, 1 or 2 years, really. And back in those days, I remember asking my dad, well, if people can print money, why don't they just print more money? And my dad was like, no, they could never do that. That's a crazy idea. It wouldn't work that way. But sitting here in this day and age today, I'm thinking, well, maybe it wasn't such a crazy question after all back then. Like, it seemed like an impossible thing, but actually that's exactly what's happening right at the moment. Yeah. But anyway, I was talking to my dad, and I had a thought about, I did a maths exercise. I was very much a maths nerd, and I thought, how much money am I going to make in my lifetime? I wanted to work that out when I was in year 7 or 8. And I did the calculations, and it came out to be about $4 or $5 million, something like that. And I said, okay, that $4 or $5 has to last me for about 70 years. That 4 or 5 million lasts about 70 years. And I broke it down. I said, well, if I spend this much for a house, they say kids are worth this much. There's going to be dinners, holidays. And at that time, I sat down and I thought, it's not enough. Like, I'm ending up, even though I'm earning hypothetically 100 grand a year, I'm actually only getting about 20 grand a year. And it's not enough. Yeah. And I thought, that's me working for 50 years, and that's not enough. How can that not be enough? Yeah. And so then I thought, well, there's got to be another way to make money than working. Yeah. And so that's from that point until I was 18, I started researching. I was doing a lot of researching, not just about property, about share market, about bonds, about term deposits, about all sorts of money investments to try to figure out, how do I make more money so that I get the life that I want to have.
Yeah.
And everything I read, the only thing that gelled with me was property. So then I started down that path, and that's where I ended. That's where it all began.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Steve. I didn't know about your dad and that was your background, and so learning something here about you, mate. So thanking you. It's cool. You said about your dad working the bank, and he said that they can't print the money and give everyone money. And I thought about this recently, and it's like most people think that you rob the bank by going in with a stocking on your head and a gun, right? You can rob it by taking the pen and a piece of paper and waving to them on the way in and out. But the most important way of being able to rob the bank is to own the bank and rob it from within, right? And we're in a world now where banks are going broke and all those sorts of things. Very exciting times, because the parameters of what our belief system was, it's just really a belief system in finance. It's just a belief system in how things work and what we're told and the knowledge that we are given. But when you break it down, there's lots of more moving parts. When did you first buy your property? When did you buy your first property with us? When did we first do something? Roughly.
With B.Invested. So before B.Invested, I did my own property investing, and then I started working with you guys again in 2017. 6 years. I've just had the 6-year anniversary.
6 years. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And how many properties we get to over the last 6 years?
Well, over the last 6 years, well, when I first came to you, I got to a maximum of 6 under my belt. And then now that we're with you, we've got up to 18.
Yeah, beautiful. And do you have a favourite property? Well, a couple of top favourite ones?
No, I do. I do have a favourite property. It's in a place called Coombaba. And it was a surprise favourite. When I first purchased it, it looked like a very normal property, if you will. So when I say normal, I'm not talking normal. I'm talking B.Invested normal. So it was still positive. It was still under market value. It was still a great property, but it was in line with all of the other properties that I've seen from B.Invested. But after having that one now, it was one of the first ones I got with you guys. And after having that now for 6 years, it's been very, very consistent. The rent rises have been very consistent. The capital gains that I've been getting from it has been very consistent. I've done equity pools on it 3 times now, I think. It's essentially doubled in value, and I've used that one to fund the purchase of, I would say, probably another 4 or 5 on top.
Yeah, and those 4 or 5 on top that you buy, then you can pull the equity out from them and go buy other ones.
Rinse and repeat. That's exactly right.
What did you pay for Coombaba?
I keep everything in spreadsheets, so I can look it all up exactly. Coombaba was $265,000.
What's it worth now, if you had to guess?
Well, the latest valuation was $350, and that was done probably a year and a half ago now. So it's gone up again since then.
There'd be nothing if someone's listing and they Google Coombaba, the cheapest property in Coombaba would have to be like 550, 600, 500, 600 now. Yeah. So cool. And what's the rent for now?
The rent is $440 a week.
There we go. And it'll probably go over $500 next time we look at the rents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it went up. The last time the rent went up was a year ago, so it's due for another one, and it's probably going to be a big jump this time, I'd say. Yeah,
a lot of stuff in the Gold Coast there. Like my guess, is it a 2-bedder or 3-bedder you got there?
3.
3-bedder. You probably get like 550, 600. If I'd have to guess off the top of my head now. So yeah, helps out with those rate rises.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's a good way to, I consider it subsidizing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're renting in the place that we're in at the moment, and we've just recently had a rate rise as well, and it was a substantial amount. It was, I think, $90 a week. But within the 1 or 2 weeks that rent rise occurred, I think I received about $200 a week increase from all of the investment properties. So they're all just subsidizing everything else.
But if you just had one income, you'd be paying for that.
Oh, you'd have to cop that 90. You just got to cop it on the chin.
Yeah. Cool. And so that's your favourite property, and that's just a very vanilla, like when we talk about foundation property. So if someone comes in, they buy 10 of them, then that's 10 times that amount. Like that property there should be like $100 positive now. Like on the original purchase, like $100, whatever, $200 with the new rent increase. Yeah. That's what builds the income streams to everybody. What's your cheapest property you bought?
And that was for 52,000.
Okay, 52 grand. What rent do you get for that?
Oh, let's have a look. 230 a week.
230 a week. 230. There's people here saying Steve's full of shit. You can't buy property for 52k, but here we are. So that's cool.
That one really makes me feel good, that property, because that's the only property where there seems to be an owner's circle of an email group, and so we get emails flying around all of the time, and most of the owners in there are saying, I've owned this one for 15 years and I paid for it 90 grand. And now they're being valued at, 90 grand. Yeah. And it's terrible. They should be valued way, way higher. And I'm sitting back laughing going, I bought this a year ago for almost half that price. And you've spent the last 17 years on it. Like it's been a real great investment, that one.
It's good, eh? It's good.
Yeah.
And why did we buy that one for? Do you want to share
why did we buy that one?
Yeah.
We got to a point where we hit the limit on our borrowing capacity. I mean, pretty much it's the same story for almost all of the properties. Why do we buy the next one? It's so you can fund the one after. And we always get to a point where you hit the borrowing capacity from any of the lenders, and in doing that you then need to figure, well, what do I have to do in order to appease the lenders to get more money? And in doing that, it's just about, okay, in this case we need to increase the cash flow, so let's get a property that's cheap, bringing in a real strong cash flow, and then once you've got that, you can refinance the others, bring them into a tier 1 lending, and you can carry on borrowing from there.
So at the point, like there was a point when you got stuck, I think it was maybe 2018 or 19, where you were doing a build and you had you were stuck with a second tier lender, and you sold off, correct me if my memory is right on this, you sold off a block of land. You're going to build a house on the land and sell that, but instead we just sold the land, it'd gone up, sold the land, and then we took the money from the land and bought 3 little cheapies, there's one in there's one in Western Australia, there's one in Queensland, and there's that one in Cairns from memory. Yep. And they were all about 200 in total. So 3 properties about 200 grand. They're renting for like 200, 250 each. Those 3 properties that you did were able to get you the servicing to get you out of the second tier lender. You refinanced your loans out, pulled equity, and saved yourself like maybe 50 grand, 30 grand a year or something from the interest rates. Is that roughly right? Or
yeah, that is right. But I think also the saving on the interest rates is great, but more than that, then we use the equity that we pulled from doing those refinances back into the tier 1 lending to buy another 6. So it's like I say, each purchase that you do is all about having the mindset of, what do I do for the one after?
Yeah.
Because if you're only focusing on that purchase that you're doing now, that's where your journey's going to stop.
Yeah. Cool. I had a little list of some questions here as well, Steve. So if we were thinking of, like you said beforehand, you'd bought the properties yourself and, they'd done their things.
Yeah.
If you hadn't have been on the bus that day and you hadn't seen the lady's shoulder, hadn't looked at Nathan, hadn't contacted, we hadn't spoken, what do you think would be different between the path that you're traveling before and the path that you're traveling on now? Where do you think would be different on that?
I think it's more about looking at what the results are, and they sort of speak for themselves. So I've been investing since I was, as soon as I could, from when I was 18. I started planning from when I was about 13, but I started investing from when I was about 18. I spent 17 years and I got 6 properties.
Yeah.
In the 6 years after that, I got another 11.
Yeah.
So I think the results speak for themselves. It was a much slower progress when I was doing it on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. And looking at it, like we've been talking about your goals, offline and whatnot, it's always, do you feel like there's ever been a day where it's like some people might be sitting here thinking, A, it's too hard to get started, or B, it's too hard to get to where Steve is. But then other people might be sitting there thinking it's that must take a lot, right? Like Steve must be loaded and driving around in Lambos and Ferraris and stuff, right? Has there ever been a day where you sit there and you feel like confetti's falling out of the sky and it's like, oh, like 18 properties, that's really cool, right? Like that's amazing, right? Very, very, there'll probably be, I don't know, probably 5,000 people or less that would have 18 I think maybe 2,000 people that have 18 properties in the country. What was I going to say? Like, what is your next goal? Like, what are you what's the next step for you? Like, has it been easy to go, oh, cool? Or is there always like a new gatekeeper that you have to unlock to go through? And what's that gatekeeper that you have to go through for the next step?
Yeah. I have to say, I haven't ever felt like, okay, I've made it.
Yeah.
The goal is to retire, and that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened yet. So the goal is still the goal. It's still there.
Yeah.
And the challenges, I think, are just different once you start building up bigger portfolios. It's less about, okay, now I have to save money to build up to be able to purchase the next one. It's more about, okay, what is the roadblock? At the moment, it's borrowing capacity. Okay, so what do I need to do to challenge that? Yeah. And there's always a hurdle, and it's about understanding the hurdle and not letting it beat you down too much, because there's good days and bad days. And I always remember saying that you said once at one of your seminars where you said, we're the poorest rich guys in town. And it feels like that, like there's times where you're sitting there and you think, I'm having some of the same challenges that I would have if I had no properties. I'm still trying to scrape the money together to buy the bread and milk in the morning. And I'm still trying to, search between the couch cushions, trying to find what loose change I can. Yeah. But then you sit there and you think, well, in reality, I've got 18 properties. It doesn't feel like it, but I do. Yeah. And so I think it's more about just seeing the challenges, understanding what they are, and not giving up. Yeah.
Cool. And I think that's where a lot of people give up because they're like, oh, it's all too hard, or, I don't want to have to make that commitment. And there's so many times, like in my journey, like I've been faced with a new gatekeeper. It's like, can't I just fucking walk through to this next level and just be easy? And it's like last year I got my dream house, as we spoke about beforehand, and like we've talked about this, like when I got that, like I bought a property in the Sunshine Coast. It was a block of units, like clients had bought in there as well, and that thing went from like 300 to like 1.2, whatever I sold it for. I sold it. That gave me the cash required to get into the dream house. And, I didn't know 10 years ago that decision that I took would get me to the next, like to get me through that hurdle. I didn't even know what the hurdle was going to be in front of me. But when you rock up to that challenge, you've got lots of options at your disposal rather than rocking up and going, okay, I've got my fists to fight with. I've got like a bazooka. I've got, you've got different things to work with. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you've really hit the nail on the head by saying you have options. My previous company that I worked for was an FMCG company making lots of cheap small goods. And they were a global company and they closed down out of Australia and New Zealand. And all of the company lost their jobs overnight. And it was, I'd say, about 400 staff, so 400 people that had this happen. And I was, because of the investment portfolio, I was able to sit back and not panic because I knew I still had income coming in from the rents. But it also gave me the opportunity just to watch. And I watched everyone else, and I watched their response to something like this happening. And it was something out of their control. It's something that they weren't able to make a decision on. They weren't able to affect. It's just something that happened. And you could see the panic on almost every one of their faces saying, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Any money that was coming in has now stopped. And it was a great reminder to me that this is the right approach.
Yeah.
Like you say, it provides options. So I knew that I could sit there and have the rent coming in. And if that wasn't enough to keep us going, I could sell a property and I'd still end up with a great portfolio at the end. And if it really got bad, I could sell another one, or I could sell another one, or I could refinance and pull equity and live off that for a while. Like I had a whole little toolbox that I could dive into, and everyone else was out there trying to figure out what to do. And it was sad to see, but it was a real great reminder and lesson for me.
Yeah. And it's just those days when like sometimes I had one recently. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was like in a car with someone, and I had like 10 calls just bang, bang, bang. It was like 3:50, and I had to make some urgent decisions on a Friday afternoon, right? And then I hung up the phone. It was all okay, and I said to the person in the car, I said, I just want to be left alone, right? I just want to be left alone for the day, right? Yeah. And he turned around. This guy's like, he hates the system, right? He doesn't like the system. And he goes, well, you could just go get a job in government, right? And when he said that, I was like, whoa, everything doesn't seem that bad now, right? And it's like, and it's not anything bad for government jobs, but it's like, the options that I've got, like, yes, the challenges arise, but that's a part of pushing forward, and it can be overwhelming at sometimes, but yeah. Cool. And I guess if we were to find a DeLorean, hop in it, drive at 88 miles an hour and go back to the future and take you back 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago when you were 13 or whenever, and go, okay, you could do things differently. Do you have any sort of thoughts or feedback to other people that might be watching going, well, not do this or change? What would you change?
Yeah. I like to try not live my life with regrets. I don't think that's a good thing to have. Yeah. I don't know how much I would change. I think the biggest benefit that I took from this journey is to see myself, don't delay. There's no point waiting, because the world will continue moving on, and you can either go with it or not. And I remember hearing a little story about someone who was saying, well, I wanted to go out and get my doctorate, but it's going to take 8 years for me to get it done. And this was an older person, I'm already 50 and I want to go get my doctorate. What's the point? Because by the time I get it, I'm going to be nearly 60 and, I can't do anything with it. And the advice that was given to them was, but if you don't do it, you're going to be 60 anyway and just not have a doctorate. And I was like, well, yeah, that's true. That time is going to continue on. So I shouldn't delay. I shouldn't wait. I could spend my whole life sitting here in fear going, what if, what if, what if? Yeah. But I would say 99% of those what ifs don't ever come about. And the 1% that do, all they're doing is giving you a chance to improve. So a what if situation will come through and you go, God, how am I going to get through this? But then you get through it. And then you've just added another tool to your toolbox to say, okay, now I know what to do if that happens again. Yeah. And so you just keep going through those.
If you're talking to, I don't know, a 20-year-old watching this, I was just doing a podcast beforehand with someone and one of my staff, and they said they've got a kid that's turning 18 in like 2 weeks' time, and he's coming on board to buy his first property. He's saved up. He's watched me for like 5 years or whatever, since he was a little kid, like literally. So what would be your tip to that person buying their first property?
Well, it sounds like this guy's already made it. And the reason I say that is because he's already made the decision to go. I think the biggest hurdle is people having that fear of not taking the first step.
Yeah.
You know, and each person does it for a different reason. Some people are scared. Some people don't believe in themselves enough. Some people have, you know, that catchphrase, analysis paralysis. I like to think of it as they're waiting until all the traffic lights are green before they start the car. And it's never going to happen. And so I think the best piece of advice there is just don't wait. Just don't wait. Sometimes things will go wrong, and that's fine, and you'll get over it, and you'll be fine. And I think the only other second piece that I had, and that's based purely on my journey of trying to do it on my own before becoming a client of B.Invested, is make sure you have a good team around you. I think that's really important, because when those times do occur where a challenge comes up, you're not alone. You got a whole team of people there to support you, to lift you up and help you get through it. Yeah. And I sit there and I think, if I am doing this on my own, I have my 41 years of experience I can rely on. Yeah. But if I've got 10 others, I don't have 41 years of experience. I've got 400 years worth of experience I can rely on. Yeah. And so I'm only going to be better off by using it.
Yeah. I guess on that front as well, Steve, like when you have a problem, it's hard for you to go and chat to someone else about your situation, right? The more
well, not a lot of people have the same mentality, you know? Like, I can't imagine going back and sitting with my mum and saying, hey, I've got a real big problem. I got 18 investment properties and I don't know how to get 19. Her response, because she doesn't understand, and she approaches it from a perspective of love, it's worry for me. She's like, but what if this? What if you don't have any tenants coming in? What if, you know, the economy crashes? What if the property prices fall? What if? And there's all these what ifs. And I mean, look, there is a chance in some world out there that might happen, but I haven't seen it yet. So
sounds like your mum and my mum have been talking, right? It's the same thing. The same thing I hear here as well.
Yeah, but it's just because they don't understand, and they've come from a generation of quite severe poorness, probably, and so it's about trying to save every piece you can, and having a mentality of using some of your money to get more money is just a foreign concept that wasn't taught to them.
Yeah.
And I guess it's not taught to us either, but we have to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like you go back to the 90s, you put your money into a savings account, your dad's working in the bank and someone's got their money in the savings account at 15% interest rate. It's like, well, that's a good investment. You're getting 15% return at that period of time when everything's, turning to crap. But that's not the world we live in today. Like the system can't support a 3% RBA cash rate. We've now seen the banks go broke, and it's different times, different game that we're working with. So
it took me a long time to understand. I remember reading. I especially when I was younger, I did a lot of reading. I remember reading a book called The Silver Bears, and that was about these guys manipulating the silver market. But essentially in that book, they were talking about what a bank does with the money. And that was the first real insight that I got into it. And I was saying, well, if someone is selling their home and someone else is buying it for, let's say, $100,000, just to make it simple, that person A gives person B $100,000 and they put it in the bank. That bank then lends that $100,000 to someone else making the sale, and they give it to the person that they had the house. And what do? They put it straight back into the same bank again. And it's just the bank recycling that money over and over again, time and time again. That really made me stop and think, oh my God, there's so much here that I don't understand. I need to learn more.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, it's easier to ignore a problem and just be like, I don't want to know more about it or whatever, or it's all too hard. But taking the time, like I think that when we look at it, like we're getting programmed as a kid to spend 40 years of our life trying to get money, like you talked about before, and you reverse engineered and calculated what you will earn in your lifetime. I don't think people are doing that out there. Like people aren't sitting there going, well, there's a problem here. How do I increase this? How do I find another way to earn double the amount of that? And if you're going to go and spend 40 years of your life earning an income, like, wouldn't you want to know, like, our whole life is designed around going out there and collecting money, right? Everything about it. And wouldn't you want to spend the extra bit of time to go, how does it work? How can I propel it? How can I do this? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, Steve. Well, I appreciate you coming on the chat today, and I really enjoy it. And I learned a few things just from chatting to you about your background as well today that I didn't know. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. And I think the viewers will really get a good, something that I'm sure there's lots of little gold nuggets in what you've said today, so that people can relate to. So thanks a lot for that. Is there any further comments?
I mean, I had a bit of a thought about it when you asked me to join you on the podcast, and I thought, well, what kind of advice would I give? And there were two pieces. The first one was make sure you've got a great team around you. And so, I mean, if people are listening to this podcast, then they already know where to find that team. So that job is easy. Yeah. The second one comes down to trust. There's always a point that you get in your journey where you just need to make a leap of faith. And you say, well, am I going to trust that property investing is the right thing for me? Am I going to trust that B.Invested are going to work in my best interest? And at that point, you need to make that leap of faith. And my biggest advice would be, when you get to that point in your journey where you need to rely on trust or faith or whatever you want to call it, take that leap. Take that leap and see what happens. The fall's never as bad as what you think it can be.
Awesome, Steve. I appreciate that. This isn't a paid advertisement from Steve either. Just us having a chat. So thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that. And it's been, I always love when we catch up, and you're a gentleman, and we'll catch up soon. It's in September, isn't it? We're catching up for the big day.
Yeah,
awesome,
absolutely.
Mate. I'll wait.
All right.
We'll catch up soon. Thanks a lot for that, Steve. Thanks for everyone for watching and tuning in today. If you like the podcast, make sure you give us a like. You can find us at Google Play, Apple Play, Spotify, and YouTube. Catch up soon. Have a great week. Bye for now.
Yeah, like Bilal said, man, we're stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take it. The dollar about to die, soon to be hyperinflated. This my 2 cents, don't care if you save it. Joint be decentralized and you will see you been lied to the whole time, and it's the irony, cause they do the exact opposite. You become a slave to the system, enough your money, all they do is profit. There's no conspiracy theory, you better hear me. Crypto will set you free before the system does. I don't care if you do or you don't, but what I'm saying is the truth to the reason you choke. I never been a failure, excuse my behavior. Keep talking, haters doing me a favor. They all telling lies, I know what they been telling you. I'm the opposite, like Donald Trump of Australia. It's amazing, here for the taking. My time is never wasted, just getting wasted. These girls say I'm really breathtaking. I can't help it if I really misbehaving.